Welcome to the Studio Talk podcast. I'm Xiomara Sosa, your co-host. Every week, we speak to our community members to teach them about mental health through education and awareness, and our hope is to inspire them through social change advocacy. We also interview community members and other mental health professionals, clinicians, healers, students, and wellness professionals. Our style is storytelling. Everyone has a mental health story to tell. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional and is not a substitute for psychological diagnosis or treatment. It's purely educational and purely social change advocacy. If you find yourself in any sort of mental health emergency or distress, please dial 911 or go to your nearest emergency room. Welcome everyone to the X Podcast, Real Conversations about Mental Health. This is episode number 48, and today's topic is Caregiving Part 2, Finances. We're going to talk about finances in general, caregivers, the person that's being taken care of, and etc. I was just telling J-Rock this might be a longer episode, and if it is, we'll have Part 3 with it. And we'll just keep going until we're able to cover it all because it's really important and on topic. So I am your host, Xiomara Sosa, creator and executive producer of this podcast. Our mission is to teach our communities and listeners about mental health through awareness and education and to inspire them through social change advocacy. As a social scientist and social change advocate, I strive to have real conversations about all things related to mental health here on this podcast. I am a clinical mental health counselor, a national board certified counselor, a licensed professional counselor, and a clinical supervisor in South Carolina. As a holistic therapist, my approach is inclusive and culturally competent. My counseling specialty is clinical mental health. My clinical mental health specialties are anxiety disorders, depressive disorders, gender dysphoria, and trauma and stressor-related disorders. Those are the ones you'll find in the DSM-5. My areas of specialization are integrative mental health, multicultural counseling and therapy, and women's mental health. As a United States military veteran, having served in the Air Force and Army, I celebrate diversity, I honor and promote equity, and value inclusivity in all communities, but especially in marginalized communities. I am the founder, owner, and CEO and clinical director of Somerville Women's Mental Health Services, which is now a teaching private practice here in the Low Country of South Carolina. I'm also the founder and executive director of a nonprofit organization called the X Studio, a mental health cooperative. It's a place for counseling interns and licensed professional counselor associates, LPCAs, to start their journey as the next generation of professional mental health clinicians. And you will be meeting that next generation next week, I think. No, in May. They start in May. Yeah. Cool. All right, so today I am joined by my co-host, J-Rock, and I will let him introduce himself.
All right. Well, hey, everybody. I am J-Rock, co-host and technical advisor of this podcast. And basically, I'm a professional broadcaster. Been doing it for 20 years, and love everything audio and broadcasting. And also, most importantly, I'm all about self-development, self-growth, and continuing to just be a better version of myself every day. And I feel like I definitely get that being a part of this episode, this podcast, and also just learning new things and unlearning quite a few things in my past as well. So it's just a great education for me, and I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah. We love J-Rock here. And so if anyone walks in while we're recording, because we tend to have an open door policy, and whoever shows up, either from my world or from J-Rock's world, because he records his podcast after we're done with this one, and then his crew shows up for that, and sometimes I make them sit, so you might see some of them. I don't know. Yeah. All right, so the first thing that we're going to talk about, although this episode is going to be about all the finances involved in caregiving, and for me it's a very, very personal story for lots of reasons, because as you all know, and I've mentioned before, when I survived 9/11 at the Pentagon, one of the things that I was just inspired to do was just dedicate myself to caregiving for my parents for the rest of their lives. Mm-hmm. And I moved heaven and earth to make that happen, which required them having to move back to the States from the Dominican Republic. So they chose to actually sell their property there because they initially wanted, and this is the finance part, they initially wanted to have it as something that everybody inherits. And remember, I told you about that crazy Dominican law where everybody fights about it, and I just didn't want to. And plus, I always felt it was their money, their shit. They busted their ass as immigrants that had to come here. It is theirs. We don't need it. We're grown. We can take care of ourselves. So part of me asking them to come down here, they decided, yes, I want to do that. And then they sold it, and they basically lived off of, it wasn't much. It was like $40,000. They basically lived, and I told them, live off of your money, live your life, do whatever you need to do. And when that runs out, you'll have your Social Security. And then when anything and everything else comes up, that's what I'm going to do until you take your last breath. That is exactly what happened. In my case. Yeah. So they came down here. I sold my house in DC. They helped me sell my house in DC. And my father once said to me in his little accent, this is the best decision you have ever made, because the money I made from selling my Washington, DC house after 9/11 was really a good nest egg to get the whole next, like, at least decade or two that I needed to get going. I actually was able to then finance my house in Florida about a year later and not have a job, just having land there, because of the fact that I had sold that house. And I held on to a lot of that money to do that. And then they used their money to buy a little house in South Carolina for like a year in between us moving before we went, so that they can be with the family before we left. Then they sold that house, and it wasn't really a lot because they only had it for a year. So they really kind of just broke even. Yeah. So that's kind of their story. That's my finance sort of general, how it started with my caregiving. And so we're going to talk about what the lessons learned are, what some people are going to try to say behind your back, in front of your face, in front of they're just going to talk shit that they don't know about. But you know, what I have walked away with in this experience is that trust yourself, surround yourself with people that don't do that shit, get rid of the people that do, and keep really, really, really good ass records. Like, be excellent. I learned how to keep excellent documentation because I worked in the Pentagon. So there was no if or waits, and it's just stayed with me forever. And there's things obviously that I can't get a hold of that I just can't. But in general, if you're going to accuse me of something, or you're going to look at me sideways, you better be real fucking sure about what you're saying. Because chances are I got documentation, and this is just not bullshit that I say. It is there. I can turn it over. I do turn it over. So be real careful. But beyond that, understand, when we talk about caregivers and the financial stuff that happens to them, you're going to see why that's even just such a shitty thing to do to a caregiver anyway. And because here's what happens. So we're going to talk about the difference between what a caregiver is and what a caretaker is. Last week, I think we talked a little bit about how I was a caregiver, a primary caregiver, which meant 24/7. That was my job. And everything else was secondary. My little part-time jobs, going to school, all of that was secondary to my unpaid 24/7 caregiving, which if you hire somebody to do that, we talked about what that's like. So thank whatever family member and friend is doing this and not getting paid and giving up their life to do this. Be grateful. Okay? Because if you had to pay them, you wouldn't. You know? So last week we talked about the difference between a caregiver and case management, and I explained how I did both. The reason I did both is because I was a professional case manager in my jobs. So I did case management at a domestic violence shelter, at a Low Country AIDS, at different places that required case management for each person. And I've been doing this in health and human services all my life. So by the time I took over my parents, I knew that they needed case management, usually as a social worker from an agency or something. But that's hard to get in South Carolina, because South Carolina just is what it is, right? So because I knew that I wanted to do this it was like I was a professional anyway, so I did that for them. So the case management is anything that isn't about their day-to-day at-home stuff. So managing medication, managing insurance, managing health appointments, managing anything and everything that has nothing to do with like sitting at home with them and making sure they're eating, like all of that stuff that a social worker would be doing basically is what a case manager, dealing with all of the resources and trying to get the grants and trying like anything like that. This is what people get paid for. So if you go apply for something at DSS, they're going to assign a case manager to you if you're in disability or something like that. And that person does all of that. So I did that for both my parents. That's something we talked about this week. This week, we're going to talk about the difference between being a caregiver and being a caretaker. So a caretaker, what's that? The term caretaker and caregiver are used interchangeably, but they're really different and distinct. So a caretaker focuses more on like maintaining the property. if there's a property, things that are not related to directly to the person being cared for. So they're not bathing them, they're not feeding them, they're taking care of the garbage that needs, not even that, because I took care of that.
Yeah.
But if there's the caretaker, they make sure that the roof isn't falling apart, the grounds are maintained, and usually people are getting paid to do that, right?
Yeah, right.
So it's not related directly to the human person, but it is related to things in their immediate, and it's usually property related. So you'll see in some homes where people are there, and that's where they're aging out, and that's where they're receiving their caregiving. They have their caregiver person, and then the place has a caretaker that fixes the faucet if the faucet goes bad and all that, because you can't have a caregiver doing that.
Right.
That's the difference between the two. So, for example, in my personal experience, when I landed here in 2011, of course, I had the full-time job of both my parents and everything else. So the idea and the plan and the vision was, my brother was not a professional caregiver, caretaker, case manager person. He wasn't in the health and human services field. I was. So I took all of that stuff on, right?
Yeah.
I managed all of that. And then he did, the little basic, hey, can you take the trash off of me? Can you clean, like little things that I would ask for? But like the actual day-to-day caregiving was not his thing. What he was good at and what he did was the caretaker stuff. So he made sure, the driveways were safe and the stairs were safe. And if there's a loose plank, we got to fix that, and if the lock isn't working, we need to fix, like he did caretaking. But in his case, it was the main structure was his house anyway. So he already had to do that. That's where he lived.
Yeah.
That's where his children lived. That's where his life was for years and years. So he was already doing that anyway. So it was just a matter of looking out and making sure that everybody was sort of like, so there's no rocks in people's way. I don't have to move it. Yeah. He would move it, kind of thing. And I don't have to hire somebody to do it. So that was the basic difference between being the caretaker, which I considered that he was, and the caregiver, which is what I was.
Got it. Okay.
So that's just an example, because that was that. So the roles are a little bit different, and you're supposed to work together and
right.
like interchange and help each other out and all that. All right. So the caretaker is primarily concerned and focused on the upkeep and management of property, buildings, and objects. I did it too, but while he lived there, he also did it because, like I said, it's his house.
Yeah.
And he needed to do that. And he when everything was good, he did it, because that's what he wanted to do, and it was his labor of love and all that. In terms of my parents. So, for example, mowing the lawn. I'm not going to mow the lawn. I'll pay somebody to mow the lawn. So he mowed the lawn, Moving heavy items. I'm not going to do that because I already have enough stress. So he moved heavy items, Those are things that the caretaker person in your life is going to help you with. You're not going to do that as a caregiver.
Gotcha.
So handyman stuff, that kind of thing. So the direct services is what the actual person who is receiving caregiving gets from the caregiver. All right. So the reason that I wanted to bring that up is because being a caretaker of a property and all that, it's more transactional or task-oriented relationship.
Okay.
With a focus on fulfilling practical needs like property and, cars and just stuff like that. They're typically paid for these services. But for example, in my case, we didn't have to do that because we were contributing to the same cause, right?
Right.
There was no money or anything for me being a caregiver or whatever. It just wasn't. But most normal circumstances are not like ours. So you would have to pay a caregiver and you would have to pay a caretaker to do those two separate things, and then they kind of work together.
Gotcha.
When they're caregiving somebody. All right.
Yeah.
So caregiver provides personal and emotional support to individuals. They provide case management, not always, and activities for daily living. In the health and human services field, there's an acronym they use, which is ADLs, and that means activities for daily living. And when people come to your house, they have a list. It's an official list, especially for the particular population that you're working with. So if it's kids with disabilities, it has one list of things. Brush the teeth, make sure they their hygiene is all of that.
Right.
And with elderly people, depending on what's going on with them, what their issues are, what illnesses they have, their ADLs are very specific to that.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So daily medical and comprehensive needs, often with disabilities, illnesses, or aging-related needs. That's what ADLs are. So that's everything that I would be doing.
Okay.
Or a caregiver that you would pay would be doing.
Right.
The caregivers focus on providing direct personal care to individuals who need assistance with daily living activities, really including physical, emotional, and practical support. That was 100% of my role with both my parents for over 20 years. So as caregivers, we, especially family caregivers, are caring for our loved ones. There are also professional home health aides. That's another option for caregiving. So after a while, towards the end, when it became really, really heavy with the cancers and the COVID and everything else that my parents were getting, I actually qualified to have some home health aides come.
Oh, okay.
Through a grant that I had to keep applying for as a caregiver. It was specific. So as a caregiver, I got to have 2 or 3 hours on Saturday for them to come and do some home health aid so that I can go take care of myself and take a shower, take a break.
Right. Yeah.
Have my therapist.
Exactly.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Wash my clothes because I would wash their clothes and their, all of their soiled bedding, all of that.
Right.
Shopping, all of that. You'd be surprised how many things people do when they care you. Everything that they can't do anymore, as they age and as they get ill. So these professional health aides or someone who provides care at an assisted living facility who are paid to do it are also caregivers, but they are not on for 24/7 like family caregivers are. And that is the key difference I want to talk about when we're talking about the finances and the financial burden that family caregivers take on. The people that work at these facilities or that get paid to go to somebody's home for 2 or 3 hours, they get to leave and they go home, right?
Yeah.
The rest of us who are doing this 24/7 and aren't getting paid for, we don't. We don't do that. That is our home. That's where we are. That's where we live. So, and we're not paid. So unless you live with the person, if you're living with the person, then you're on duty 24/7. If you're just hired by an agency and you're going to the house for 4 hours or 12 hours or whatever, you're getting paid and you get to leave and you get to go home. And that is really basically the difference between that. But they're still caregivers, right? It's just a family caregiver is different than someone you pay to come in. So the relationship usually involves a close personal relationship with the focus on being on well-being and quality of life for your person that you're caring for, which was my number one concern with my parents, right? My relationship with both my parents was very close and very personal. They depended on me 100% in every aspect of their lives as they aged and as they became ill. And then culturally, as the eldest Latina, we talked about this, and we're going to do a whole episode on this because it's just such a mess with people who don't get this. They just don't fucking get this.
Yeah.
Anyway, culturally, as the eldest Latina child, and also as, a real labor of love. I did it for more than 20 years, and it was not anything I'll ever regret doing.
Right.
So family caregivers are almost always unpaid. It depends on the context, but family caregivers are often unpaid, while professional caregivers are paid. So there are about 53 million caregivers in the USA providing informal care for individuals with chronic illnesses. That's a lot of fucking people.
Yeah, it is.
53 million people. And these are the majority of them don't want to do this. There is not a labor of love for them. They hate that they have to do it, and they do it, because they have to.
Right.
And there's all kinds of messes there, and good people. But
for sure. Yeah.
So these caregivers contribute significantly to the healthcare system. Yet they may experience adverse consequences due to their caregiving, including financial burdens, which is what we're going to talk about today. And I just needed to give that whole preface because some people tend to minimize it and act like, oh, you're just living there eating bonbons, so what's it to you? That's what it is to me. Like, that's what it is. So,
there you go.
So there's a lot of research on the nature and effect of financial interventions for family caregivers. Chronic illnesses are conditions that last 1 year or more, requiring ongoing healthcare attention and or limit their daily activities. I'm going to say that one more time. Chronic illnesses are conditions that last 1 year or more, require ongoing healthcare attention and or limit their daily activities. So in my case, my father had diabetes. My father had severe arthritis. My father eventually ended up with leukemia after he got COVID. And he also had mild cognitive impairment, which is basically dementia. My mother had other things, but the big thing for her was she had cancer in her stomach.
Ooh, yeah.
So not only did they have aging-related situations that you already have to do all of this with, then you have the addition of these incredibly complicated and painful medical things that are going on, right?
Yeah.
So if they never get a medical thing, it's still rough and hard and expensive and all that, but it's not as double whammy as now they both have this major chronic, not going to go away, only going to get progressively worse, and the best you can do is keep them healthy, not healthy, but like comfortable and loved and comforted. So excuse me. So all right, so where was I? So the attention, it limited their daily activities, and this all definitely limited their daily activities. At the end of the day, my father was unable to really move without someone, without his little Rolade and all that. And my mother was having trouble just going upstairs and downstairs. Like, there's a lot of things that you get to see them when they're in their good state of mind when you come visit them for an hour or two, but you don't know what it's like for them the rest of the day, early that morning, all night long, to get to that point where they can tolerate you for 2 and 3 hours,
Yeah.
because of everything that somebody did for them, so that they can enjoy those 2, 3, 4 hours.
Yeah.
So like, be kind to caregivers, because I have such a chip on my shoulder right now about that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so family caregivers assist with daily living activities, provide complex medical and nursing tasks at home. In addition, family caregivers navigate a multitude of healthcare-related tasks, including assisting with health insurance claims. Biggest pain in my ass when you're dealing with Medicaid, Medicare, and insurance.
Yeah.
Please. And in South Carolina, let's just face it. Facilitating medical care and social services. That's what I was doing as case management. Nobody even wants to do that for themselves. Try doing it for 2 elderly, sick people with chronic, deadly illnesses. Providing transportation to medical appointments. If you only would see me with my father in his last few months, I needed help. Like, there had to be somebody to help me with him, get him in the thing, get him to walk to the car, getting in if he didn't fall. I mean, it was hard on my body and it was hard on him. But I wanted to do it. He wanted me to do it. And thankfully, I had a good neighbor across the street. I had my nibblings and, their friends that would help me, because in the end, really, there was no physical person there with me every day to do it unless I called, and we all know where that went.
Yeah.
All right. So what is financial caregiving? What do you think financial caregiving is?
Honestly, I feel like, but basically like helping with like bills, things like that, like trying to make sure, like, I know
they eat,
yeah.
They have gas.
They have gas. I just know that just brings me to like when my grandmother passed, and it was like a whole thing in my family that like, okay, who's going to take care of the house? Like the bills got to still get paid and all of that. So it's kind of it became a big thing like after she passed, and it ended up having to be what it was. But it's kind of like, like, who's going to take care of that? That was just a discussion that I know a lot of my first cousins wish they were a part of. It was kind of like, it's we wish we were a part of this so we can maybe formulate a plan to help with that. But, that was kind of...
Those are the best cousins. I love those cousins.
Yeah. But it's,
I have those cousins. I love them.
Me too. We were super close, but like having to deal with that. So when I think of like caregivers, like financial well-being, I'm just thinking about like, hey, make sure like the bank accounts, everything's still good, and getting everything that they need to keep everything going. But
it's something. So financial caregiving is a relatively new term that the Health and Human Services field has decided is important enough. What it really means is describes everything from paying the occasional bill for someone to entirely managing their finances. So in my case, when my parents came to live with me, and they had sold their property and they were living off of their own money, I just oversaw them to make sure that they weren't getting, robbed and, that kind of thing. But my parents were pretty savvy and smart. And I had tons of cousins in Florida that were looking out for that. And my brothers were also very good at making sure, like watching and making sure that they weren't getting taken advantage of by like random people and all that kind of thing. So, but when it came to like, when they were aging more and getting sick and all of that, the thing that I really made sure happened was that they had no debt, that they had no rent, that they had no mortgage, that they had nothing that really required any of that.
Right.
My father had a little credit card before he got dementia, and then I just paid that off and got rid of it once he got dementia, because it was just like a couple of $1,000s or something like that.
Yeah.
And he would use it like to just buy little things with and whatever. And then I got that paid off and got rid of that. So that my vision was so that when they get to the point where I had to manage all of this, I did not want to have to be chasing.
Right.
I didn't want any of that. All I wanted to deal with was like the medical stuff and bills and money, and then like their day-to-day living finances, right?
I see, yeah.
So my father, I originally really kind of like, they didn't really have their own account here. I had an account, and so what they ended up doing was just putting their name on my checking account so that their Social Security can get deposited there. And then it's all three of our names. All three of us had access to it. And they had a debit card. Like they always had a debit card, all three of us.
Yeah.
And so whenever I got online or I got the thing in the mail, the statement or whatever, I see all the activity that was going on. So if it was like something wild and crazy, I'd be like, okay, hold on, what's going on?
Right.
But it was usually typically always the same thing. My mother spent at the same places. My father spent at the same places. They bought the same little things for themselves. So they used up like their Social Security during the month, using their little card, doing their little things on whatever the hell they wanted to do.
Yeah.
And at the beginning, they used a lot of that traveling to come down here to see all my brothers and the children and everything, and stay here, all summer, for months, for weeks, for whatever. And then they would drive back. So that kind of gave them financial freedom while they were still able to do it. But it allowed me to start making the transition into watching over so just that when they get to the point that it really needed, it would be simple.
Right.
It's just simple. It's just your Social Security. That's it. There's nothing else in there. So that's what ended up happening with me. But for a lot of other people, it's much more complicated than that. In America in particular, because people have, CDs and money markets and and that and property and what's that called? Retirement fund, like all
401ks, all of that.
Yeah, my parents were very simple immigrants that came down here, did what they did, and like in DR they were rich, but here they weren't. So here they were very simple. My father was on Medicaid, so I was like, what money do you think he has? Like he literally was on Medicaid. So you can't get it. You can't get those. You can't be on those things and have money. And have money. So anyway, so for me, it was simple because it was just one account. Even for me, I simplified my own life, and I had one account. Yeah, that was it. Yeah. So even when I tried to get his Medicaid for him, I had to answer questions to them. They were like, "What is this? Whatever money, because I was like, oh, that's my money that I make as a whatever worker that gets deposited in it, but that's for me, that's not his money." And as soon as I was able to give them my little pay stub or whatever, they were like, okay, cool. Right. Okay, cool. Then all he does have is really nothing, whatever. Right. So I had to show that, and then they were able, but they looked through that whole bank account. Like they looked through it back, forth, upside down, and whatever before they approved him for Medicaid. And they asked all kinds of questions and all kinds of stuff. And I was able to answer and say whatever. Yeah. Like, no, that's my money. No, that's this. And prove it and all that. And this is his. So if you're going to do that, put your banks together. And you know that eventually you need to do Medicaid or something like that, or a government program for them. You got to be able to have your documents in place, because they're going to ask you questions. And then if you can't, they're going to deny it because they're going to think that it's his. Right. Or like the parent, your whoever you're caregiving for who's aging out. And in my case, I was able to show it wasn't. So he ended up getting his community long-term care through Medicaid and all of that towards the end, because I was able to show what was mine and what wasn't. So it was his. So that's one thing to look out for, to do that. So it's very common for caregivers to begin with taking care of simple little matters, but transition into providing financial care over time. Caring Info provides resources, and I'm going to put that in the show notes as resources to try to figure out how to not fall into pitfalls to avoid, because it can get overwhelming. And I can tell you this, I'm going to tell you this from experience: have your own finances together. Like really understand what your finances are, what debt you have, what debt you don't have, pay it all off, go down. Like one of my reasons why I wanted to not have a mortgage when I came here, not have rent, not have anything, and pay for something in full, construction from beginning to end, was because when this happened with them, and then my life came on, I wanted it to be simple and clean. I didn't want a mortgage, I didn't want rentals, I didn't want any of it. I wanted it simple and clean, and I was able to plan that ahead of time. A lot of people can't do that. So if there are other ways that you can do it, do it. So financial caregiving doesn't really have a formal definition. It's a term used to describe managing the personal finances of a seriously ill or impaired person, an elderly person, or other adults who require assistance, people with disabilities, including paying bills, monitoring bank accounts, managing trusts, filing taxes, and taking on financial power of attorney. That is a big part of what goes on when you take on the responsibility of caregiving for somebody the way that I did. Or if it falls on your lap and you're now in charge of that, this is what. And a lot of people can't even manage their own shit. Let's talk about that for a minute.
No, that's a fact. Oh my God.
Talk to me about that.
Oh man. Well, so I'm gonna go back to that that example of my grandmother's house, because it's just like, I don't know. I guess the thing about my family is that, at least with the adults, the moms, the aunts and everything, they were very kind of like, they didn't want us involved.
Yeah.
And
when you were children or as grown-ups?
We were, I would say, because when my grandmother passed, we were like young 20s most. So,
Yeah.
I mean, we were.
So you were just starting.
We're just starting. And it was kind of like, and like the grandmother, like she was the matriarch. So it's kind of like, okay, that the one house that we wanted to try to hold on to was like, that was the house where everyone met at. So this is, we all were raised by her in this house.
Yeah.
So it's super important.
That was the hub.
That was the hub. Basically, it was Thanksgiving, all of that. So it was kind of like, when we found out that they ended up having to sell the house, like us, the cousin, like we're distraught. So like, oh man, like, I mean, like I said, wish we could have done something, been involved.
It's a piece of your history.
Yeah. But at the same time, when you think about it, when you're grown, like, cause now years later, you think like, okay, but who would have taken care of that?
Yeah. Because that's a whole nother responsibility.
That's a whole nother responsibility. And we're trying to get our foots in, like we're just now adults. We're trying to make it out here in this world. And it's like, okay, but who's gonna go over there all the time? Who's pretty much live there, honestly. Do you have your affair? How's your situation? Exactly. How's your debt? And it's just,
It's really big. And so one of the things that you need to take into consideration, this is what my parents took into consideration when they chose who, well, I mean, it was always going to probably be me anyway, because I'm the eldest Latina and that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
So as it stands right now, and I'll just give you an example, just in my immediate family. My mother's brother lives in New York, and he has 5 kids. The eldest Latina is the one that right now is doing what I did. Like, she's been doing it, and she's doing it with him, with my mother's brother, and with her mother. She is their primary caregiver, 24/7, in charge of everything and anything. They chose her for a reason. Number one, okay, the eldest Latina usually is, but if you're a shitty eldest Latina who has a trail of destruction in your life, then you're going to be fired. They're not going to let you do it.
Gotcha.
But there's that. She does it. And then my other cousin who lives in Puerto Rico is my mother's sister's daughter, Sylvia.
Okay.
So Sylvia and my mother's sister, Maria, have lived together forever. When I tell you culturally, intergeneration, multi-generational households, these are the two. The two of them and me are the epitome of what a real Latino, first-generation Latina family looks like. So the one in Puerto Rico, the mother has been living with her and her husband forever. Well, she has her own little place on the side kind of thing, like in-laws and whatever. But they all day, all the time together, the 3 of them. And she takes care of everything with her, like everything. Her mother is aging in place. Her mother is, all the finances are taken care of. They do everything. She has nothing to worry about. She is in a good space with my cousin, my first cousin. And they chose these two. Well, the one in Puerto Rico, her dad died of cancer a long, long time ago. And so she promised him she would take care of her mother anyway and all that. But at the end of the day, in my case, for example, my parents were very clear. It's not that they don't want everybody to take care of them, but they knew that financially, I was the one with the least history of issues and problems.
Right.
Because nobody married me and tried to take all my money through custody battles. Nobody married me and I was broke forever trying to get on my feet while I got myself together, because the divorce and the custody battle was really expensive. Or in another case with one of my other brothers, somebody married him and he didn't even know that the mortgage wasn't getting paid on the house until he got a foreclosure notice, and all hell broke loose. And he had to go get a bunch of jobs to try to catch up and not lose his house that my father helped him get.
Yeah.
And then they ended up getting divorced and everything. So there was no history of people coming into my life. And this is not to judge them, because you never know. You never know.
Right,
you never know.
Lives.
People are what they are and whatever, and you just think people are different and things happen to them. But for one brother, it happened more than once. And for the other one, it happened more than once. And there was always like a financial stressor on them, and they had to catch up, and they were this, that, and the other. So through no fault of their own, and then one has a disability now. Well, for a long time, he was struggling, not being able to work because he hurt his back on the job. And so he had to really struggle until he got his pension and disability. And then the other one with his job. So it was just always, I'm catching up. I'm not saying. So my parents were like, okay, how are we going to no. So, but with me, it was different. Like and it doesn't mean that I'm better than them. It's just that my situation was completely different.
Yeah.
So I didn't have those kind of marriages. I didn't have have those sort of children-related issues and costs and custody and all that just drained me. I didn't have people coming after my shit, coming after my house, coming after my money, coming after my... I don't have any of that. I didn't have any of that. And on top of that, I was just stable. Like I had a history in my life, and not to say things didn't happen and shit didn't go down, because it did. But for the most part, I owned my condo in Florida when I lived there. I owned the house in DC when I lived there, and I owned my house in Florida when I lived there. I didn't move in with somebody. I didn't need somebody to buy it with, and on that. So if you're not in that situation, then you're likely going to be more burdened if you have to take on caregiving for whoever. So I was lucky I didn't have that, and so therefore I just looked like the one, you know. I just didn't have all of that. Also, I was very careful about things and all that. I've never been a spender. I'm not a luxury person. You know, you're never going to see me in some stupid fucking Mercedes just because I can. Like, you're not going to see that. And so to my parents, that just looked like, okay, well, if shit goes sideways,
right? Like,
at least know.
At least know.
Yeah. And if she can't, she's going to turn to her brothers and they're going to help her. Like that was our reality. And I believed that. And I knew that was everything that I believed to be true. So, but not everybody has that. So when financial caregiving has to happen, those are the kind of things that you have to take into consideration. Yeah. You know, like not just what somebody's intentions are, but what's the history there? Yeah. What's happened in the past? What's happening now in the future? What kind of people are coming into their lives right now? What's their situation? Yeah. Are they in foreclosure? Are they divorcing? Are they financially on their feet as they're coming into your family, or are they not? We don't know these things. And then they come in, and then so you have to be careful because stuff happens from that. Yeah. And my parents, seers, they can see shit, you know? And so if this is something that other people are kind of considering and trying to figure out what to do, those are very serious financial things to think about as someone who you know requires being taken care of in the future, like my parents did. They were very smart in how they went about doing it. And then they were also blessed because then I was in a position where I wanted to, I could, let's do this together. We'll go, you know, and it went. But a lot of people, I tell my story not to brag, but not everybody has it like that. And some people have it better than I do. They can give whole houses and everything else to people, you know, so, and other people have nothing. So it's all, we have to be kind and show grace to everybody's different situation. Absolutely. So more than 90% of caregivers act as financial caregivers, which may even include contributing their own money to cover costs in addition to managing the care recipient's money. That was me. And that's likely going to be the majority of caregivers. You're going to have to contribute. You just, at some point, your money is going to be, it's like it reversed. They used to do it to you. Now you have to, now you gotta do, you don't go grocery shopping and just buy for yourself. You're buying for the house of the people who are living there that you're taking care of. And you're buying them especially what they need and want, you know, like not just for you. And then they just eat whatever you get. Like it all becomes one. Like the force is what I call it. So after 2 years of starting to receive general care, more than half of the recipients need complete assistance managing their finances. This is the source that I got that from is Merrill Lynch. Okay. And I will put all that in the show notes. So I'm going to read this paragraph again because this is just going to give people who are incredibly ignorant, unaware, or just plain not know what they don't know, don't get about this. Right. So more than 90% of caregivers act as financial caregivers. This is the norm. This is not like, oh man, people are coming in and trying to, this is the norm, which may include contributing their own money, which is the norm. Eventually, you're gonna have to have your money right so that they can be okay. And then you have to get their resources and everything else together to kind of like join it together is what I'm saying. Got it. Yeah. To have different avenues, not just yours, not just theirs. In addition to managing their care recipients' money, if they even have money. In my case with my parents, they didn't, and in the end they didn't. They had their Social Security. After 2 years of starting to receive general care, more than half of recipients need complete assistance managing their finances. So if you can't step up and do it, or you can't get somebody to do it that you're going to pay to do it for, step back, mind your business, and help if you want to help. Right. But don't be sitting back there telling stories and telling lies and murmurs and whispering and suspicions and shit and bullshit. Right. Because you don't know what this entails. And if you suspect something and you really suspect something, speak up, go to the authorities if you really think it's real. Instead of this nonsense, what my mother calls chismosaing behind everybody's back, trying to sully people. Step up and do the right thing. Don't try to use this shit as a weapon.
Right.
Don't try to use this shit to smear when you don't even know. You know?
Yeah, 100%.
Hire somebody that's going to find out for true. Plenty of social workers do that for a living. So find somebody.
Right.
All right. So this is especially critical if the person you're caring for suffers from dementia or would otherwise not be considered competent to make decisions soon. This is incredibly important because that was me. That was my case, right? And people see things and they want to act like they know, right? But when you're dealing with somebody with dementia, and I'm not talking about long distance dealing once in a while, here and there, seeing some little things. When you're literally they're 100% dependent on you and they have dementia.
Yeah.
They are not competent of even understanding what's what.
Right.
In my case, when something was going on last year that you know about, I had to do this emergency request with this one particular lawyer who's a judge also. And she had me bring my father in, and she did it's like this little test that they do, like this verbal test to them to see if they are competent or not. To manage and do their own things before they give you permission to do something.
Gotcha.
So I had to bring him to her office, and she sat there, and within the first 10 minutes, she said, absolutely not. We're filing an emergency. It was an emergency conservatorship for you, and we're filing an emergency guardianship for you so that nobody can come and try to get him out of his caregiving, change his caregiving, remove you from him, change anything up, put anybody new in there, try to get access to any of his stuff. That is not happening. I am filing today. And I did. I filed. I gave her, it was like something like $7,500 I had to give her for her to start this because they were trying to, first get him out of his caregiving place where he lived, which is my home, our home. Then they were trying to uproot whatever caregiving they were going to have and say they were going to send in nannies, not really ignorant things. When he was at a point where that would destroy him, that would just absolutely destroy him to do any of those things. And also, why would you do he already has this.
Right.
He has this.
Yeah.
He has the best of it. He doesn't need it. So she got really upset because her thing is elder care. And she just was like, absolutely not. This is abusive. It is going to be absolutely detrimental to him. And so we started the process.
Okay.
And it required my cousin in the Dominican Republic, who's an attorney, to try to get his original, because the court wants your original, okay, people, listen to me if you're caregiving. Make sure you put your hands on the original birth certificate of whoever you're caregiving for, because when you need to make decisions like this, that's something that they're going to ask for. And they asked me for that, and I found everything except that. And so I had to come. My cousin in the Dominican Republic, who's an attorney, was trying real hard to find his original. And now you're talking like 1930s. So they went back looking for this, and 3 days before she was able to find it, my dad passed away. So filing the all those. Whoa, my phone. Do you hear what my phone is saying? Jason, I don't know if I told you that, but he I don't know how to turn this off.
Oh, okay.
Hold on. He has a thing on my phone where you can talk to it and ask it anything, and then it'll start AI stuff. Yeah.
AI stuff.
So it just listened to me, and it heard me ask for about caregiving, and it's talking to me about that. Oh my God, that's too much technology for me.
I know, it's scary.
No. Yeah. So anyway, it was a few days before my cousin was about to send it to me so that they can file for those two things, custodian and the emergency guardianship, to prevent him from being, and all of us from all of that, and he died. So I ended up not doing that and getting my money back. So this is where I learned that is really important, even if you have financial things that you need to do.
Yeah.
For anybody like that grows like that, and you never know what's going to come at you in the middle of this, be prepared and have that, because you're going to need that. And I learned that in a very sad situation, very upsetting situation.
Yeah.
But I learned that, and luckily that attorney, who's also a judge here, she was just fantastic and phenomenal, and I always recommend her to people. Okay, so financial caregiving is the management of another person's finances due to changing life circumstances, like aging, disability, or illness. Is there any other circumstance that you think financial caregiving would apply?
Oh, well, let me see. Well, yeah, like say if, that would be kind of in the same vein. Like, let's say if somebody gets into a major accident.
Yes.
So
they're incapacitated.
That's it. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah.
They're incapacitated.
Right.
Or they're under severe medication.
Right.
And they can't do it, or they're impaired mentally because of some sort of drug reaction that they have.
Right.
There's so many things that can happen that, you know. So as you enter a period of financial caregiving, which is what eventually happened to me, it's important to know about resources that are available to you so that you are organized and take on any challenges that occur, like medical debt. And that was the number one thing with me. Like when my mother she got put in hospice twice. Once was a couple of years after I landed here, so 2014-ish, 15, I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
That was her first one, and the doctor told me, start making preparations. You're going to have to say goodbye and tell family and da-da. So she's going to go into hospice. And so I was devastated. My brother we were all devastated. But then her oncologist did like some sort of, I forget what it was. We went in for something, and he said, there's this medication that's available. I don't think that the insurance covers it yet. It has really good, like the research shows that it has really good prognosis for people that have this particular kind of GIST is what it was called that my mom had. And there's a good chance that she might respond well to it and go into remission.
Okay.
There's a very high chance, but it is expensive. And your insurance is going to be a while before I can help you get insurance to cover it.
Yeah. What
do you want to do? And I was like, that's a no-brainer.
Right.
Like, if I can help my mother live a little bit longer and whatever, it's not like it's my dog, you know, where you like, oh, no, I don't know. She's kind of, oh, this is my mother, and she still has life to live and everything.
Yeah.
And so at that time, that's when I was telling you I had to choose between letting my house go, paying for my mom, like, am I going to use money for that?
Yeah.
Or am I going to just let my house go? Like, which of the two am I going to do? And I chose my mother. I chose my mother because I already knew I had paid for this cottage here where they were currently living in.
Yeah.
And that was my own personal thing that I was looking forward to having, right? Because that was my plan.
Right.
So I knew it was a no-brainer for me. So why was I holding on to this thing when it was recession and George Bush and blah, blah, blah going on? So not worth it. And I called the bank and I said, listen, this is what's going on. My mom's got cancer. There's this chance, I need to let this house go. And so they're going to try to, so I said, but whatever you do with it. I can't. I don't want it. I'm not making the payments anymore. So I was hoping that they can do a short sale with it, but they weren't able to because at the time, you know, the big recession and all that stuff. So they just went into foreclosure and they did whatever. I personally never kept up with it, didn't give a shit. I was dealing with my mother almost dying and trying to get her medication. And I did my due diligence. I called, I said, this is what's happening. I made a choice. That was my choice. And that was that. And so never even looked back, never even cared, didn't really fucking give a shit. Like, didn't really, priorities changed, did not care. I did the right thing because my mother ended up getting really well, going into remission, having kick-ass life, being able to hang out with everybody. We were all happy. She had to take this medication every single day.
Right.
Every single day for the rest of her life. And she did. And it was expensive as all hell. And Medicare was not covering it. It just was not covering it. And so I got extra insurance for her and all this. And eventually, between the doctor and everything, they were able to get them to pick up the cost. And they were able to do that, which was a good thing because it showed efficacy or something. And it has to show efficacy. It has to show that it works.
Gotcha.
You know.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that was my case. So I say this to tell other people that you just never know.
True.
You just never know what's going to happen, what's going to come up, what you can do, what your choices are going to be, and what choices are not going to be.
Right.
That happened to be mine, but everybody's is going to be different. Just be prepared to think outside the box, to make hard choices, because that's probably going to be something that'll come up.
For sure.
And medical debt is just, it is what it is. It's medical debt.
Yeah, you're right.
I try to minimize it as much as possible for them, you know, but some things you can't prevent. So there are many sources of financial support like private insurance, Medicare, Medicaid, and other governmental and private programs. It's just that they can be so overwhelming and they can be so scary, and they can be, if you don't know what you're doing, it just turns into a thing. You need support with that. But they're out there. So what are the financial burdens of caregivers? Let's talk about that. Experiencing health consequences due to caregiving and then managing short-term and long-term health issues is costly. It is costly. Just because some of us make it look easy and make it look like woohoo, it is costly.
Yeah.
With just over what is it? What does that say? Like $6,000 in annual costs for individuals with chronic illness. And that's just like one person, one time.
Yeah.
Imagine if it's all the time, every time that are going on, and you get more than two people, and then you get yourself. And you don't have that kind of money for yourself, much less for them. But what are you going to do? Let them suffer?
Exactly.
Like, what do you do? Like, what do you do?
Yeah, so...
Buy a new fancy car, go on vacations? I don't know. What do you do? So how do you provide financial caregiving? Taking care of someone else's money-related matters, whether it's as simple as paying a few bills, because you don't have to take on the entirety of their situation if you don't have to.
Right.
You can take on something small and let other people take on other things that they're able to do, right? Or something as formal as getting a financial power of attorney. That's still financial caregiving. I did not have to do that because my parents didn't have that kind of, they don't have an estate. Like, they didn't have an estate. I don't know why some people who I won't even mention thinks or thought that they had some sort of like, I don't know, gigantic nest egg or something from the Dominican. I don't even know what that thinking is, but even if that did exist, not my fucking business, not your business, it's their business, you know? Right. But at the end of the day, that did not exist, and that made my financial caregiving a lot easier because I did not want to do that battle with anybody over this. I did not want to struggle with it. I didn't want to do it with anybody else. So, and plus they lived their life and they lived their good life on their money. What I did that was very smart, and what I'm encouraging everybody else to do is don't wait until you need it. I set things up and I looked for things and I tried to learn as much as I could before they needed it. So I found out about programs before they were eligible for it. I had a resource file that I can check to see. In Florida, it's just a lot easier because it's just a different thing in Miami. But here it was much harder to try to figure out. But I got to know people that worked in that business, like the senior people at the senior center, if they're going to that. Find out then and there what resources are before they get to need it. Find out what's in the neighborhood so that when they need it, you're not floundering around, stressed the hell out, trying to figure out what to do with them. You know, like know ahead of time. With my dad, when they first landed here, they were able to go drive themselves every day to the senior center for years for free, eat, drink, dance, party, hang out, whatever there, until my mom got sick with her cancer. She never wanted to go back, so she didn't. So he kept going. And they would pick him up and drop him off and whatever. It was just lovely. One day they called me. You're gonna have to, and this was one of the saddest, other than watching my mother and my father take their last breath, this was one of the saddest days ever. And they called me from the senior center here and they said, Miss Sosa, you're gonna have to come and get your dad. He's in the bingo. They had like this big bingo. And as much as we've been trying to manage his behavior, we just can't do it anymore. And I think it's time to talk about him not being able to come back. And I knew that was gonna break his heart. I knew it was gonna break his heart, and I knew that it was gonna change and disrupt the entire household on how this, because everybody got to live their life as long as they were going every day to that senior center, being picked up and dropped off and everything. It was easy. But I knew that when that ended, it was not that it changed. It was going to change everything. Everything. I knew it. So I sat with the director and she explained it to me, and she said, I really do think that it's his dementia. I think it's coming up. Here's what happened. And she told me what happened, and I was crying. And she said, and unfortunately, these are signs of that. And he has really great moments, but because of all of the other people that are here, we need to keep them safe and all that. But we hate to see them go. And they were crying. They didn't want to see him go. They were all sad because they knew him for years. And the saddest thing, I'll never forget this, they had a big room with like the big bingo thing set up. I had to walk all the way around. And then when he saw me, he looked at me. He's like, oh, what are you doing here? And I said, okay, Bob, we have to go because I need you to come help me with whatever. I had to make up a story. No, I can't go. I'm playing bingo. He was all about the bingo. The bingo and the bingo. And I'm like, okay, but I need you to come help me with mommy. Like I had to make up a story. And he just said, okay. And he grabbed my arm and we shuffled out of there. And it was like I could just hear taps playing in my head. Like it just felt so sad because I knew this is the beginning of a whole new world for him, and this place was everything. And so when we walked out, I got home, I told my brothers and my nieces and everything, and I just cried that night. I just cried and cried and cried and cried because I knew this was it. This was going to change everything. And luckily, I had already found a local place that did dementia care, memory care, but you had to pay for it. It wasn't free. It wasn't free. So I couldn't have him going there every day.
Right.
It was way too expensive. So I had like 3 days a week or something that he could go until I found something else that I was paying for. But I knew it was there. I knew that that's what they did. And they helped me as much as possible until I was able to find another place that didn't require, that wasn't that expensive, where he could stay longer and maybe his insurance would work and all that kind of stuff. So what I'm saying to everybody is, look for things before the financial burden comes up. And in my case, I knew that was coming. So I was not spending money because I knew that if that happened, it was going to be a crisis and I was going to have to come out of my pocket for it.
Yeah.
So while I was doing that, I couldn't give my brother, for example, I was giving him $350 or $500 a month on and off to help with things that he was doing.
Yeah.
And I knew that I could not do that anymore. I had to now pay for my father. That was the choice. Either you or you. And so I chose him because he can't be home by himself. And he can't be home with my mother because my mother was sick with cancer. And it makes her, it was not helpful to her. So I had to make that choice. That still required me driving him there, picking him up until I got him on the bus that did that. And it was only 3 days a week or something, and it was very expensive, and it was coming out of my pocket, you know? And then I found another place, and then we just moved on. So these are examples of, even if it doesn't work out in how you're planning it, have different options, talk to different people, and explain to people that you're working on things. You're trying to make it the least expensive, the more doable, not uprooting everybody's life as much as possible.
Right.
But you're going to need the support. You're going to need people to not give you a hard time when you're making these choices and trying to do the best thing for that person. So family caregivers, financial well-being. Let's talk about that for a minute. All right. So I have a little personal note here that I was going to talk about my stuff, but I kind of talked about some of that stuff a little, so we won't go into that. So the estimated economic value of the unpaid contributions of family caregivers to chronic illness care is approximately $470 billion. That means that because we're doing the caregiving, that's how much money would go into what we're doing. 470 billion American dollars. That's the economic value to what this country does. And unfortunately for our country, unlike for my sister, my first cousin in Puerto Rico, that's not a thing because the culture out there doesn't, like, they don't need that because everybody's at home with the cousin, the uncle, the sister, and it's the norm, and everybody it's very multi-generational, it's very intergenerational, it's all about the caregiving and taking care of the tribe and the village, okay? My other cousin in New York, she lives in a place where that is the norm too because the majority of the people there continue to have those ethnic and cultural norms, and so therefore she has a little bit more of a struggle than the other one, but she still has her brothers and her, you know, she still has a community that she lives in where that is the norm, and the neighbors and the cousins and the comadres and compadres from years ago are part of it for her.
Right.
But that's not the norm across the United States, and that's why it's $470 billion. I guess say. So family caregivers experience multiple consequences due to their caregiving role, including financial distress. I am not above that. When I dealt with my financial distress, where was anybody to help me? Like, honestly, and I'm not saying poor me, pity me.
Right.
You know, but it's not like 500 people came out of the woodwork to say, what do you need? You need some coffee? Let me go get you.
Yeah, not true.
You know what I mean? Hey, man, you what's up with your car? You need your car washed? I'm going to do, like, I didn't unfortunately have that. I didn't have those people. I had a partner at the time who was excellent at that kind of thing. I'm not going to ever throw that partner under the bus for any of that, because when I look back and I see the immense amount of things that was done for me just from the goodness of someone's heart. But you know what? They also had a mother who they had to care for and caregive for, and they too needed caregiving because they were disabled. They were 100% disabled veteran. So they understood that you're either going to need it or you're going to have to do it to a loved one. So they were incredibly aware and passionate, and not just like, they were beautiful with it, and did everything better than most people do when it comes to that. But the majority of people either don't know, don't care, don't come out of, they're not coming with their money saying, okay, here, you got to pay that. Let me pay this for you. So that ain't happening. That didn't happen to me. And and not that I'm saying, oh, everybody should have done that. No, I'm not saying that, because I didn't. I did it anyway.
Gotcha.
But it's just years forward, looking forward, and you're looking at some of the crap that I've been looking at and reading and hearing and watching, and I'm like, the nerve.
Yeah.
Nerve.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
The fucking nerve.
Ugh.
Anyway, so financial distress or burden in family caregivers is related to multiple issues, including direct and indirect costs of health care for the care recipients. So my parents had a lot of direct and indirect care, financial care, health care stuff that I had to deal with, changes to or loss of employment. Okay, let's talk about that. I was not eating bonbons in my bedroom and hiding away from everybody all day, as some people would like to say. I was literally in respite or in depression, or tired as shit, or really deserving a good rest, or having quiet time. None of your business. None of your business.
Right.
Not helping me shut up, right? And you people out there, if you have people like that in your lives, I'm telling you, get a backbone and say, fuck you. Even if you have to say it to yourself behind closed doors.
Yeah, no,
if they ain't
for sure.
helping you and they're not there trying to fuck you is what you say, because they don't have any idea. So the cost of employment and healthcare to the people who are actually caregiving, because you get burnout, you get all of those things that we used to talk about. And then where are you finding time to take care of yourself? When are you going to the dentist? When are you going to the OBGYN?
There you go.
I found out I had cancer in the midst of all this. I landed here, I started doing this, and then a year or two later, they're opening up my face, digging out cancer out of it. I'm having surgery because I have skin cancer. Oh my God, who knew? And who was going to take, thankfully, thank God. I mean, I did have one brother that took me and then for the operation. And then I had my niece who nursed me for a long time while I recovered from that, because from all the trauma of that. And that, I was lucky that wasn't something that took me down for a long time. But what I'm saying is, what if it's something worse? What if you have something bigger and worse? Or if you have a mental health issue? What if your major depression comes back? And depression, if you have clinical depression, you can't do anything. You can barely brush your teeth, much less take care of anybody else.
Yeah.
So have some grace with people who are doing this, okay?
Sure.
Because if you're inconvenienced and you think your inconvenience is whatever little stupid thing is that you're being inconvenienced about, it's nothing compared to what other people are doing in the care and service of somebody else who can't take care of themselves.
That's a fact.
Period.
Yeah.
All right, so out-of-pocket costs have been a substantial contributor to the financial burden of family caregivers. Most family caregivers suffer steep out-of-pocket expenses related to caregiving, spending over $7,000 on average for one person for direct medical costs and indirect costs, including food, meals, household goods, travel costs, home modifications, and legal fees. That's just the bare, tiny little minimum, right? So if you don't have that, imagine when it gets real.
Ooh-wee.
So over half of the employed caregivers, and these are the employed caregivers who get paid for this, like Sia does now, of all ages, have found it challenging to balance their work and caregiving duties. They report coming in late, leaving early, or taking time off to fulfill their caregiving role. That's a problem for people. It wasn't for me, thank God. But that's a problem for people. You can't just not go to work.
Right. Yeah.
Remember we talked about that?
Oh, yeah. No, 100%.
And then if you don't go to work, who's going to feed you and pay your bills?
Bills don't stop.
You know what I mean? So you have to have a partner who's willing to do that and good at it.
Yep.
And able to.
Right.
And not holding it against you, giving you attitude, telling you have to pick and choose and what. There's so many things around, So over 75% of individuals who retired early due to family caregiving would have prolonged their engagement in work if they had access to alternative work arrangements, such as flexible hours, shifts, telecommuting, compressed schedules, paid leave, or phased retirement. In my case, I planned this out ahead of time. I went back to school. I knew I wanted to be my own boss. I knew I needed to do that with my parents.
Right.
I knew that I needed to do that because there's no job was gonna be like, okay, girl. And I had one here, and they were still kind of problematic about it. And they're in my own field, and they knew before they hired me.
Yeah.
That I was doing this, and they still had issues with it, and they're like in the field. So if you're lucky enough to be able to have a job that'll you don't have to lose or be in trouble for or be stressed out about or anything, that usually doesn't happen. Mine didn't happen overnight because God blessed me. I mean, I planned it. I really did.
Yeah.
But the majority of people don't have that option. They just don't.
Yeah, no.
So family caregivers who either disrupt their careers or leave the workforce completely, like I did, to fulfill their caregiving role can experience substantial economic risk and both short-term and long-term financial strains.
Yeah.
Caregivers have lower income in later life. They have lower income in later life, reduced engagement in the workforce, and lower net worth compared with non-caregivers. That's some shit. You do this God work.
But you don't.
And then at the end, people are like, oh, she chose or they did or whatever, and blah, blah, blah. And then they don't understand
At all,
that this is what comes of it.
Yeah.
And so, of course, they're going to fight you if you try to what is wrong with you? So the total opportunity lost of foregone earnings, that was my case. Because, if I didn't choose to do that with my parents, I did choose, like I said, as a labor of love, no regret. I could have made so much money. Like I would have been independently wealthy right now.
Yeah.
And even while I was caregiving for them after COVID, I was getting all kind of recruiters calling me to go to Texas and go to all these places where they had these like $200,000 a year jobs, and they needed bilingual professional people who are licensed professionals to do this work, and they were willing to put you up and pay for your housing and all that kind of stuff. I could have been able to do that if I didn't choose my parents. I chose my parents all the time over that.
Right.
So you make the choices, but at the end of the day, people need to understand how you come out of this. So now I don't have that 200,000, and I don't regret it for a minute. But I'm just saying, careful what you tell people. Careful what you're talking about.
That's true.
Because you don't know what people are not doing and having, because they want to take care of their loved one or whatever. So financial distress is also a health equity issue, with women being more likely to suffer from poverty and or rely on public assistance services due to their caregiving responsibilities. Women are disproportionately negatively affected by caregiving in America. Caregivers who identify as Black, Latin, Latinx report greater financial strain. So we're going to leave it there just because I think we're going to have to do a part 2 to this, and we'll pick it up. Well, actually part 3, and we'll continue all of the financial caregiving stuff, because it really does get really interesting as I go down the list of all of this. So we'll leave it there. I think that's enough. That's heavy. That's interesting.
It is.
And we'll see, we'll pick it up next time and go on down the road on how this all works for people. And then I'm going to talk about what you can do about it, how you can turn it around, if you can turn it around, and if it wasn't able to get turned around, what kind of things you can do for yourself and what is out there and what isn't out there and the reality of it. We'll talk about all of that, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and more of my own personal story. Since people are questioning that, I might as well talk about it, right?
That's right. Oh.
Okay, so it's the end of the show, so here we are with my question to J-Rock. J-Rock, what is your takeaway? What did you learn from this episode?
Oh, man, it's so much. It's like...
Don't I always do that to you?
No, but it's good to think about, because I've had conversations with my father, because he's getting older. He just celebrated a birthday, so he's of that mind frame where a lot of his colleagues are starting to pass on. He's still young, but it's just like it's happening because health issues. It catches up.
It happens.
So it's like we've had these talks, and just like the will and all of these uncomfortable talks that most people have to have that talk eventually. So you going through all of this, and it's just got me thinking, like, man, am I like truly getting prepared? Like, even though it's like knock on wood, but still it's something that I have to like have in the back of my mind. So like the last episode, I was thinking about it, and I'm gonna keep thinking about it.
You up at night.
I'm telling you, it's just the financial. That's the one thing I constantly. It's a worrisome. But also, though, I'm extremely lucky to where my dad, he's own business owner, retired, so he has everything
in
set.
Place. Yeah.
And I know I'm extremely fortunate of that, because I'm looking at this, and even with that, I'm thinking, okay, he has this, we've talked, but still, am I still going to be good for when that eventually happens? So that's just. it keeps me up.
Do you think that you're going to be like me, like the actual primary caregiver for your father?
100%.
Okay, so you're
He's already told me that. I'm the oldest, so it's like he kind of
already trusts you, like my parents trust me.
Yeah. So it's kind of like, so I, in my mind, I'm just thinking like, okay, like, am I going to be ready for this? So like, where am I going to be at in my own financial? Yeah. I mean, hopefully I'm going to be in a great space, speaking it to existence, but, but also though, it's just, this information is just, it's great information to have, but also, I'm not going to lie to you, I'm just a little nervous.
And you should be. And that's the point of this. And how this all wraps up into mental health. Okay. How does this mean? Because everything I do is supposed to be attached to mental health. Caregiving and mental health go hand in hand.
Yeah.
You cannot do caregiving for anybody else. If your mental health is not right, you cannot do it.
Yeah.
Don't even think about it.
Right.
No matter how much you want to do it, no matter how much you think you could do it. If you have unresolved issues, if you're not taking care of those unresolved issues, if you're not being mindful of the issues that are coming up, if people come into your life and bring their new issues, and they do that, which happened to me, and it happened to my family. That people come in and then all other shit starts happening and whatever, and now you have other issues that you shouldn't have. And but if you don't have that solid, and by that I mean you're just on top of the world, all healthy with you. No, that's not how it works. But that you don't have some sort of system in place to keep your mental health right, you will fail. You will fucking fail. You will end up in the hospital. You will end up in a ward. You will end up walking away, getting on an airplane, never coming back. You might end up having a nervous breakdown. You might go into a major depressive episode. There's a million things that can happen to you that almost happened to me. And they didn't happen to me because I was taking care of my mental health above all else. Like, I cannot stress that more. I cannot stress it more. Anybody that was in my life, no matter how much I loved them and cared about them, and they were my ride or die, or they weren't, the minute they came all twisted and added any kind of unnecessary, undeserved, fucked up stressor, they were gone. I cut you off. You were gone, frozen out, gone, because I knew I cannot afford you. I will die. I will lose it. And my parents will suffer. There's no way that is going to happen because I'm already strained. I'm already stressed. So that is the connection with your mental health, and why all of these things are and why planning ahead and understanding that there will be people on your side, and there will be people who say they're on your side and then aren't. And then there will be people who are on your side and somebody else comes into the picture and then they're not. Then suddenly you're the bad guy. Or somebody's going to come into your life who loves you and wants to be with you, but they can no longer deal with you doing this thing, stuff, and you can't choose them, and then they have to leave. That happened to me. I have lost relationships over this. I have lost a lot over this. And 2 important relationships over this. So don't come at me telling me, oh, I have a life, oh, I have a hot job, oh, I made those choices. Now that was for me. That's not going to work for everybody, right? Like maybe you can't choose not to go with that person, or you can't choose not to. Maybe that's your thing, and I respect that. But for me, I lost that, not more than once. And a lot of lament, lots of regrets, but I would never ever do that to someone else. I would never be in somebody else's life and expect that they would have to choose between their caregiving family situation and me to prove to me that I am now new, and therefore I am the new whatever here, and I have to feel that. And I would never do that. I would go into there and be like, how can I help you?
There you go.
Guys, all of you. Or what, at the very least, how can I make this me not create issues and problems and stress and this and that and what? That's what you need to do, one or the other. But you have to have your mental health so in check, because this is, they're going to test you. You're going to get tested, and you're going to have to respond, and you can't be responding by arguing and fighting and yelling and screaming all the time and losing your shit and getting wrapped up in all the fucking drama that people bring around, because they're not taking care of their mental health, or they have their own messes that they need to clean up, and they're in your face and in your life and in your whatever, and now all of a sudden you're the bird. Like, you cannot take it. You cannot do it. You cannot make room for their shit. Not even a little bit. The minute somebody says no when you ask them for something when you're caregiving, leave. Go find yourself anything else. Find yourself the neighbor, the cat, the dog, the sister, the cousin, somebody else. Anytime somebody says no, and not just no, I can't because I'm sick, but it's just inconvenient. I can't call into it. Okay, because I have to. Like, right. I do. So, like, you know the people that got you sick and you know the people that don't.
Right.
Be aware of that and be ready with your mental health to take what comes with that, because it is a hard hit.
Yeah.
When you got to let go of somebody who you love and you want there with you, but they're just no good for you. Not now in this season of life.
Right.
You know, in this season of life, they're just not good. They're and in fact, it's bad because your mental health has to be really good in order for you to do this. And as time goes on, like with your father, and as it moves on, and say he gets ill and he gets dementia or he gets this or he gets cancer and inevitably he can't move or whatever, your mental health will get tested more and more and more and more and more. So all of the relationships in your life cannot contribute to that mental health stressor. They cannot do it. They cannot be in your life and do that. You cannot serve two masters, is what I'm saying. So you have to be lucky enough to have people who would never dream about that, who would never dream about making you choose or make you worry about where you're going to live or make you worry about just basic fundamental needs that you have. Like, you cannot allow those people in your life to distress you that way, because you will lose. So you got to let go of those relationships as much as it hurt, and it hurts like hell. But you got to do it. So I think what it sounds like you learned is that there's more to caregiving than just cleaning somebody's t-shirt and sitting with them for 3 hours while they watch TV with you. Right. There's way more than that. Way more, and the last two things that we talked about is making that clear. Oh, absolutely. 100%. Yeah. And there's more. When we start next week, when we really get into the nitty gritty of this, you're going to see just how much. And you really, really do have to. And you can do it. And you can really do it, especially if you're like a good-hearted person and it is a labor of love for you. And more importantly, you actually love and adore the people that you have a good relationship with, the person that you're caring for. It's very satisfying. It's very there's something that every night I used to go to sleep just thanking God, thank you God for one more day with them. Like I appreciate this so much, because I appreciate this so much, and to this day I'm very grateful about that. And that's going to be the thing, that's going to be the reward in the end. And the reward that they look at you, like when they know the time is coming and they're looking at you and they're like holding your hand and caressing your hand and saying things to you like, you're right about da 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 da. I just didn't want to tell you. Look out for that. That's going to happen. I'm going to look like, or they tell you did a good job. Don't let anybody tell you didn't. Like when they tell you these little things that only they would be able to tell you, in their most vulnerable moments, you feel like nothing in the world feels the way that feels. Because you know you did good, and you know that these people they're leaving in peace. And you just appreciate it. So caregiving is something that I'm going to start really, really doing a lot of work around now that I've got the interns and the LPCAs and everything coming on. I'm shifting a lot of my work because there's so many people that are coming as clients with that's their thing, and they're so stressed out and so not knowing and so whatever. And I feel like it's such a huge, it's a niche for people like me. Niche. I always go back and forth for that. Niche, I don't know. For that, and there's not a lot of people who can speak to you from life experience and also from professional knowledge. And I feel like I have that to give, so that's really changing a lot for me now. So I'm getting excited about that. Awesome. All right, so then you got your homework to do. I do. I sure do. Next week we will pick up on the next part of this, and you guys. Thank you for listening. I appreciate all my listeners out there. You can always reach out to us, ask us questions, let us know if there's something in particular you want us to talk more about, because it's different for everybody. And we'll be happy, to try that, or at least to get somebody in that can speak to those issues if I can't. And yes, I do have a chip on my shoulder about this, and one day everybody will know why. Right now, all right, guys, we're going to say good night. Take care of your mental health. Thanks for listening to the X Podcast with me, Xiomara Sosa, clinical mental health counselor, licensed professional counselor here in South Carolina. We hope you enjoy our real conversations about all things related to mental health. You can check out our show notes for reference, resources, and other show-related information. If you found value in our conversation, we encourage you to join us weekly as we discuss different mental health topics. You can head over to the X Podcast website at www.studiotalkpodcast.net and send us a message from there, as well as sign up for our newsletter. Our email address is studiotalkmentalhealth@gmail.com. You can also subscribe to our podcast and leave us a rating and review at blueberry.com/studiotalkmentalhealth. And send us a text or call us at area code 843-695-9974. Please recommend our podcast to your friends, colleagues, family, and networks. Thanks for supporting us.